Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
There have been some iconic boots within the F50 series, some of which have even included the F30 takedown models. But if there's one thing that's remained pretty consistent, especially throughout the F50 Adizero era, it's that the second tier takedown model F10 has always been pretty terrible, until now. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Adidas F50 League, what would have been the F10 back in the day as the second tier takedown model, now sitting directly below the $150 F50 Pro. It bears quite a few differences when compared to the more expensive variations above it. However, at its $90 price tag, it's arguably one of the best options, certainly in the speed category, at this particular price point. With that said, they're far from perfect, and there are some significant downsides that you should know about if you were planning on picking these up. So with that in mind, we're going to go over all the details of the $90 F50 League, the good, the bad, how they fit and feel on feet, and of course, ultimately conclude whether or not they are worth their value for money price tag. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy the unsugar-coated, brutally honest reviews that you get on this channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, we need to talk about what is easily the biggest downside of the F50 League, and something that you should know if these are on your radar for your next pair of football boots, and that's how much they weigh, especially considering that they bear the F50 name, a line of football boots known for being as light as possible, which you're getting a very lightweight boot in the top-end $260 F50 Elite. How much more does the League weigh though? Well, both in the same size 9.5 US using a scale, which does not lie. You can see the top-end Elite model weighs in at a super lightweight 6.7 ounces, the equivalent of 189 grams. Remember those numbers. We'll change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the F50 League, and you can see that they weigh in at 9 ounces exactly, the equivalent of 255 grams. For those doing the math at home, that's a weight difference of 66 grams. And granted, there is a significant price difference between these two, but even when comparing the League to the $150 Pro model above it, these are still roughly 50 grams heavier. And at 9 ounces, they're definitely not unbearably heavy, but if you're picking up a pair of F50 Leagues with the expectation, given that they're both F50s and fall into the speed category, that they're going to be super lightweight on your feet, unfortunately, they just don't have that feel. However, everything else about the F50 League is pretty good, and dare I say above average for what you're going to find from most football boots at this price point in the speed category. Starting with the upper, which is a gigantic improvement over so many second tier takedown models we've seen from Adidas over the last several years, certainly in the speed category. Obviously, people want me to compare this to the old school F50s. This is a long ways away from the laminated uppers that we used to get on early F10 models in the Adizero series. Those were absolutely terrible. And honestly, even in comparison to some of the more recent second tier takedown models in the Adidas X lineup, I think what they've done here feels remarkably premium. It's not exactly the same as the top end Elite or even the Pro, which technically kind of have the same fiber touch upper. Instead, you're going to find a material that they're calling fiber skin, and instead of a sprint web texturing, you're going to find what they're calling sprint grid, which is just the base texturing of the material itself and not actually anything that they've added. But you'll find that similar to the top end models, it's kind of a textile base. You even get a little bit of a translucent window there through the midfoot with that internal reinforcement cage. But overall, it's thin, it's pliable, It doesn't require any break-in time. It's not unnecessarily thick or cheap feeling in any way whatsoever. And the touch on the ball is, dare I say, pretty premium if you're looking for that thin barefoot feel. The grid texturing on the surface isn't quite as significant as the micro texturing in that sprint web material you'll find on the more expensive models. So in terms of grip on the ball from the finish of the upper, there just isn't as much here on the F50 League, but overall, for the price point, I would go as far as to say that this is one of the nicest synthetic uppers that money can buy. Across the top of the foot, you'll find a design that is pretty similar to the higher end models, where it's a central lacing system using a single lace hole setup and what looks to be kind of a standalone tongue. That tongue, instead of being made from a really thin neoprene, is made from a slightly more padded, admittedly cheaper feeling neoprene material, but it's kind of the same general idea where it's not actually a standalone tongue, because it connects internally in the form of kind of like this little support cage, kind of with two bands running on either side, like the compression fit system of the top end model, but without the extra reinforcement. Is it really providing much in the way of compression? No, but it's nice that once you put your foot in, after you've kind of pulled on the edges of the tongue to adjust those kind of internal pieces from bunching up, it doesn't allow this tongue to slide from side to side when you're actually playing in the boots. And from a feel and comfort perspective, really no complaints from me here whatsoever. This is quite comfortable. Moving to the rear, you're definitely going to find some design elements and even materials that are admittedly cheaper than what you're going to find from the more expensive models, but all of it feels pretty good. We'll talk about it more during the on-feet portion of the video, but finally we have a second tier takedown model in the speed category that does not have an unnecessarily an uncomfortable shallow fitting heel. Thank goodness for that. Nonetheless, you're going to find an internal plastic structure with kind of like a mock heel counter with this material stitched over top to, again, kind of make it look like the heel counter that you have on the top end Elite model. Nonetheless, feels nice and solid back here. It maintains its low cut design. We have this little kind of extension tab as well. Internally, plenty of padding, this really soft kind of microfiber lining material. No issues with that whatsoever. Then the insole is definitely on the cheaper side for what you can get at this price point, but it gets the job done. It's basically just a flat piece of foam, so it's not 3D molded like you'll find typically on higher end boots or even other ones at this price point. It features a mesh liner on top and, again, just kind of this thin layer of foam. Certainly nothing special, but again, not uncommon for Adidas in the sub $100 category. Which brings us to the base, where you're going to find what they're still calling the Sprint Plate 360, as you'll find on the F50 Pro at $150. However, this does admittedly feel more flexible through the forefoot and just a little bit more rigid through the midfoot. It does overall feel a little bit thicker than what you're going to find from the models above it, and certainly when compared to the top end F50 Elite, they just don't feel quite as light. It's very evident that a lot of the extra weight is within the sole plate, kind of at the bottom of your foot, when you're comparing this to the more expensive models in the lineup. So that does kind of contribute to the overall experience of wearing these, in that they don't have that kind of weightless speed boot underfoot feel that I think the higher end models in the lineup definitely do a really good job of providing. But nonetheless, the sole plate is flexible, it bends in the right places and feels comfortable underfoot. So no major complaints from me there. And then as far as the FG stud pattern is concerned, that remains consistent across all price points, where you have your bladed studs in the heel, you have your bladed studs kind of towards the tip of the toe, one support stud that's kind of a chevron blade as well, and then kind of like these half circles with a bladed edge, kind of Nemesis-esque studs at the base of the forefoot, not necessarily providing the most aggressive traction that you'll find in the speed category, but certainly when compared to something like the Nike Mercurial Vapor 15 Academy, which kind of has that FG-AG or FG-MG stud pattern, that also features some conical studs, and this is very similar to that in terms of feel and performance characteristics. So if you're looking for maximum bite, maybe not the best option, but if you're looking for great overall traction and still that freedom to twist and pivot, I think this is a really solid stud pattern, and overall as a base, it feels above average in quality compared to a lot of boots at this price category. On feet, forget about this being an F50, this is the best fitting sub $100 speed boot from Adidas pretty much of all time. I think the shaping they absolutely nailed. It's very similar to what you're going to find from the more expensive Pro and Elite, but lower volume all the way through, which is a common characteristic of a lot of Adidas takedown models for whatever reason. I have reason to believe with this particular pair, it has everything to do with the sole plate, which does just feel thicker underfoot, but it's not so shallow like we've seen in the past, where the fit and lockdown suffers, particularly through the heel. The heel is plenty deep enough, it feels very secure, and the boots as a whole are super comfortable because this upper is nice and pliable despite being kind of trending towards the thin synthetic plasticky side. It doesn't feel like it requires any break-in time. It's the perfect amount of pliability, but also structure where the boots feel nice and secure on your feet. From a responsiveness standpoint, you could argue that these are just as responsive as what you'll find from the top-end models, and I love the central lacing system along with that kind of neoprene tongue enclosure. Again, you have to fiddle with it a little bit when you're putting the boots on, but once you get everything set in place and tie the laces tight, they fit really well. From a width perspective, they definitely have a tighter overall fit. So I would say if you're somebody with really wide feet, certainly high volume feet, I don't think these are going to be a great option. But if you like that tighter overall fit, these should work out for most people. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I think the F50 League, especially at $90, is a really good pair of football boots, but I also don't think it's a great example of an F50. And my reasoning for that is that they just don't provide that lightweight feel on your feet, which I think is such an important aspect of not just a pair of F50s, but something in the speed category in general. What they do well, however, is provide an excellent fit. They feel tight like you would want from a pair of speed boots. The upper, I think, is well above average for a thin synthetic at this particular price point. And while the sole plate feels more solid underfoot than I think a speed boot should have, the quality is great and the traction from the stud pattern is also fantastic. As an overall product, if this wasn't an F50, at $90, if you're looking for something with a great fit and a thin upper, I think this is a fantastic option. It really just depends on what you're looking for. In other words, if you want a great pair of thin boots but don't necessarily care about how light they are, the F50 League is great. Whereas if you really want something that still feels like a pair of F50s, the F50 Pro at $150 is much better and much more F50-like.